Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about our least favorite channel on YouTube, The Root. This time they are here to ruin our beloved American holiday of Thanksgiving. Classic leftist move. Seems like we just can't have any cool holidays anymore. First Columbus Day got hijacked and turned into Indigenous Peoples Day. Weak. Then our Halloween costumes were deemed offensive because of racist cultural appropriation. Not cool. And now, less than 1 month later, and Thanksgiving is also inappropriate for some reason. What's next? Christmas? New Year's? Both of those will be problematic too one day, I'm sure, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Thanksgiving is today's topic, and let me say right out the gate, this holiday is pretty chill. Who doesn't love having a day off to drink, eat turkey, and watch football? To me and most modern Americans, Thanksgiving isn't much more than that either, but a lot of liberals like to knock the holiday, as you'll soon see. Thanksgiving just passed a few days ago too, and, well, The Root thought it would be a good time to make a video shitting on white people and the holiday. Really shouldn't be surprising coming from them at this point, but let's go ahead and check this thing out anyway. Their video is called How Thanksgiving Really Went Down, and before we take a look, check out the abysmal numbers on this thing. Barely 700 views in 2 days from a pretty significant company and website and organization who promotes the shit out of their content online, but it doesn't look like the people on YouTube are watching this. Good call, guys. Regardless, let's take a look at the video ourselves anyway and see what's up.
Thanksgiving dates back to the 17th century, and the story goes a little something like this.
Pilgrims and Native Americans gathered for a communal meal after a successful fall harvest.
Now we know it ain't go down like that.
I want to again stress how unimportant this background story is relative to Thanksgiving for a minute. This is the kind of stuff children learn in grade school. When you're about 5 or 10 or so, your parents and teachers tell you the story of how the Indians or Native Americans, how they met with the Pilgrims and broke bread with each other and ended their long-running feud with a big celebratory feast that we now call Thanksgiving. Something like that, that's just from the top of my head. But it is the basics. And sure, when you get older, you realize there's a lot more to that story and there's more details when you look into the actual history of the Americas, but that doesn't really taint the holiday like how The Root is leading up to. And most people don't even associate all of that history with the holiday in current year anymore. Not lately. Nowadays, Thanksgiving is just the third Thursday in November, the day all your family gets together and has a big meal. People aren't sitting around talking about Pilgrims and Native Americans in 2018, is the point I'm getting at. Well, actually, some people are. The Root is bringing up this ancient history to try and shame Americans in the present, and it's utter bullshit.
The Pilgrims, Protestant Christians who wanted to leave the Church of England, made it over in 1620. It's unknown that the actual Thanksgiving feast occurred by invitation, but the armed native guests arrived and outnumbered the Pilgrims. That meal supposedly included fowl, pumpkin, corn, venison, and according to one source, a foot-long oyster.
Funny how you never share the links to any of your sources you mention in your video's description. Now, I'm not the best about sources either, but I do always try and give at least one link for you guys to check out, so you can see what I'm talking about, especially if I specifically mention something as a source, or reference it like how they do. The Root never shares their links though. They just have their own promotional links in their descriptions, to Twitter and Facebook and stuff. No sources at all, just vague titles they add into the video, hard-coded. Like this one on screen now. It says, Source Sawyer, History of the Pilgrims and Puritans. But what is this from anyway? Are we supposed to go to a library and look up that book or something? And then they don't even have a page number or anything. I mean, these books could be hundreds or thousands of pages. So I say, if The Root is going to take the time to make this video and write and edit and record it, and they're going to strongly reference sources within it, I think if they do that, they should at least leave one link in the description or have something more specific on screen. But hey, I don't know. I'm just a simple man with simple pleasures.
But things weren't great for the OG Americans from then on. Europeans proceeded to push them out of their own territories, slaughtered them in mass, and raped the land for centuries. In fact, the Pilgrims themselves, armed with high-tech military equipment or guns, massacred 500 plus Pequots in 1637 after a series of smaller battles.
Yeah, the natives and the colonists fought a lot during the 17th century in America and onward, up until like 100 years ago. But this warring went both ways, let's not forget. The Pilgrims attacked the natives and vice versa. And sure, you can list off a couple of times the Europeans won and killed many natives, but I can also list just as many times that the natives killed Americans. Now sure, in the present with 2020 hindsight, we can see that European settlers eventually won this and the natives eventually died off by a lot, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend all Europeans are evil either. We're not bloodthirsty killers, and all the natives weren't perfect as well. They weren't peaceful little angels like how The Root would imply. The Root implies things were very one-sided, but the truth just isn't that cut and dry. tribe. Next, the guy was talking about how the natives were the OG Americans, and then the colonists came in and slaughtered them and raped their land. But how do you even rape land? What the hell does that even mean? I think it was just said for the dramatics of it, but I would like to counter that argument anyway because, well, the European settlers didn't rape the lands of America. They did quite the opposite actually. Colonists like the Pilgrims and others, they built this land into one of the best countries in the world, the United States. In fact, I wouldn't even call the Native Americans the OG Americans because they weren't the original Americans at all. America wasn't even a country until the Europeans came to this land and built it from the ground up with their blood, sweat, and tears. Yes, before the Americans came here, the natives were just roaming around in small nomadic tribes. Nothing wrong with that either, but it also wasn't very safe or civilized or cultured in a modern way, not like how it was in Europe or Spain or England or whatever. The Root guy even mentions the technology differences when he talks about the settlers coming in with guns. These weapons were an advanced modern technology of the time that the natives had never seen or even dreamt of before, let alone came up with the science and technology to produce it. And this is a good example of the progress the Europeans brought to this continent. Also, aren't leftists and progressives supposed to be pro-immigrants anyway? Kind of funny how they are against the European immigrants from back in the day, coming to America in the 1600s, but now, in the present, they want every immigrant to be let in this country willy-nilly. The Root even did a video about this before. It was the last time we covered their channel, when they said America was the land of baby prisons. All because we separate illegal immigrants when they break the law and trying to come in and sneak in here. Something which the Root thinks they should be allowed to do. Ridiculous. They think modern black or brown immigrants should be let into this country, a highly developed country with an already established citizenship and immigrant system. But if you turn back to the 1600s, and the Root will also say it was wrong for Europeans to immigrate here. Those are the bad immigrants because they're white, I guess. And if you think about the time they were coming in, there was no system or country here at all. No borders or walls or rules or anything. Absolutely absurd, but you really gotta respect how hypocritical the Root is sometimes. It's kind of dumbfounding.
Plymouth used to be the location of a cleared Native American village, and the land was cleared because the Native Americans who had lived there died in an epidemic left by slave raiders.
If you say so, lady, but your source at the top of this picture only says NPR though, which is a giant company and news organization with thousands of articles and information on it. I don't know how you expect people to check your sources based on just saying NPR, and I also don't get why these repeated and proven liars at the Root think people will just take their word on anything anymore. They also present things in such a biased and misleading way. This lady says the natives that were there died in an epidemic left by slave traders, which is a funny way of saying they caught diseases and died naturally from their sicknesses. A huge majority of the natives who died here during colonial times died from these kinds of diseases, like 90%. Sure, this was a consequence of the Europeans settling America and bringing these diseases with them, but that also wasn't intentional, and it certainly wasn't a slaughtering or raping of the land, like how the Root implies.
While all of this was going on, what was going on with black people in America?
The first documented arrival of enslaved Africans in America was in 1619, 2 years before the first Thanksgiving. Then, in 1863, Abe Lincoln announced that Thanksgiving would become an official holiday as a result of a Union victory at Gettysburg.
Yep, that's good old honest Abe for you. Gotta love President Lincoln. He not only freed the slaves, he was also the first Republican. Respect. Let's also not forget it was the Democrats and the Southerners who fought to keep slavery around. The Root and modern leftists love to forget that little detail, and I normally wouldn't bring it up too much either, but if they're gonna bring up old shit like slavery and the American Indian Wars all the time, might as well get things right and tell them about the history of their own Democratic Party. The left were the pro-slavery party. They're anti-Americans, and they also started the KKK too, and lots of other dirty shit.
But now that history has been erased and we've been force-fed the bastardized version of a joyous and happy Thanksgiving, things are different. We're talking parades, turkeys, family, football. Wait, football? Absolutely not.
Who is erasing the history of Thanksgiving though? I don't get that. Sure, we don't tell 5-year-olds about the killings and murders that were going on back then, and we shouldn't. Children don't need to hear about the gruesome details of the past until they get older. High school and college is where people learn the full story. They learn it now, and they always have learned it, decade after decade. No one is erasing the history of this, and no one is denying there was Indians who got killed, or that slavery was taking place in the 17th century. I guess the Root is expecting people to talk about this shit all the time or something, but I don't know. I don't get it. Things have have changed. Hundreds and hundreds of years have passed. We all know the stories, we just don't talk about them that much anymore. We don't bring it up all the time. Only social justice warriors do that. They're the ones constantly bringing up black and white photography in order to try and shame modern whites by shining a light on the whites of the past who did bad things. But here's the thing. Every race has bad shit in its past. Whites weren't the only ones who had slaves. Everyone did. And whites weren't the only ones fighting and warring with the Native Americans either. They battled with each other and others for centuries. Then when the European colonists came, they battled with them and with each other again as well. So I know the Root thinks they're being smart or cute by sharing these little stories, but they're really not. They're really just being biased and anti-white, low-key. And they're actually showing us now that they didn't know this history before. Basic high school history class stuff, and the Root's cast and crew are only learning about it now in 2018. Shows you how smart they are.
Black people love Thanksgiving because of our mamas, aunties, and grannies' recipes. I'm talking greens, beans, potatoes, tomatoes, chicken, turkey, you name it! And we love it because we get to spend some much-needed time with family. The origin sucks, but people of color have been able to make lemonade from lemons since we got here. But wait. The Native Americans been here.
Well, they've been there longer than most, but it also hasn't been forever either. The Native Americans colonized this land before too. The natives traveled across land bridges from Asia, Russia, and Alaska. And after they migrated to the Americas, they spent a good amount of time slaughtering and enslaving each other for centuries. Then the 1600s came around and the Europeans migrated over and eventually slaughtered them too. They slaughtered each other for a while. And then our colonists, the Europeans, proceeded to make better use of this land, and they created the greatest country on earth. Sounds like a pretty legit story to me. And the point of this story and this video today is this. The Native Americans were no better than the Europeans. And the same goes for the Africans who sold the Root's ancestors into slavery. Also, it's worth noting that the surviving Native Americans and blacks who are still living in America today, they have greatly benefited from their ancestors' hardships. If it wasn't for those ancestors being sold into slavery, the Root's caste wouldn't have even been born. And particularly, they wouldn't have been born in a country that uplifts them from the extreme poverty that is in Africa, which is still in poverty to this day. And also, if the Europeans had never visited North and South America, the Native Americans would perhaps still be in nomadic tribes and not have the technology that we have today. In the end, we all benefited from the brave and hard work European settlers did when they colonized the Americas back in the day. Sure, the Root likes to cry about slavery and Indian massacres, but they also won't leave this country now either. They just want to bitch. And that's because they know they are still better off here than anywhere else. What do you guys think? Does the Root make a good point? Has the history of Thanksgiving been erased or sugar-coated? Or is it just not taught to kids because they wouldn't understand it and it's inappropriate to tell kids about massacres? And what about slavery? Would the African-American cast of the Root still be happy and healthy and making racist anti-white videos like this if they were born in Africa? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. We'll see y'all next time.